I have been at Weber, is today the 16th? Yeah. 3 months exactly. So I asked Becky Jo to please come save me for this presentation because she wears two hats as somebody who's been through the tenure process and incorporated community engaged learning within that, and now being in her administrative role. And then I will be able to offer a lot of insight as well into kind of what's happening nationally. So I go to a lot of the national conferences around community engaged learning. There's a huge push for more support around tenure that involves community work, service work, community-based research, a lot of different pieces. So I have this PowerPoint that was provided to me that offers a few kind of policy resources for you, and then I thought we could have a discussion to kind of brainstorm some different ideas. Those who already have tenure could also share some of the different pieces that they've incorporated, and I can talk about some that I've seen with other faculty as well. So kind of to start, the Center for Community Engaged Learning is a really neat resource on campus. It started as the Community Involvement Center, but it's been around now 10 years. And so we welcome anyone to stop by anytime you're in the union. We have great staff. We have a staff member who works primarily with community partners if you're ever looking for a community partner. We have a staff member who works with students. And then we also have different faculty resources. So Becky Jo just finished up as the Engaged Learning Series Coordinator. And so some of you may know, some of you may not know, we have a theme this year of privilege. And so we have advertised several events on campus that involve privilege, ranging from an art show right now that Colleen's students are putting on,
in the Union Building,
to we will be bringing Dr. Steve Robbins at the end of the year to talk about mental modules. And so we'll send out the advertisement for that. We're really excited for him to come. We also have a wonderful faculty resource in Isabel Asensio. And she is in the language department, and she actually is somebody who will spend a lot of time, and some of you have spent time with her, thinking through community engaged learning and how to best incorporate that, whether you want to have your class be designated CEL or whether you, whether that's not the right route to go. So yeah, and then the other piece that I would like to say is community engaged learning. I like to think of it as an umbrella. So it's kind of this, my terrible umbrella. Markers don't work. And then, so a lot of you know the term service learning. And so service learning has long been the word that's used to support classroom. If you're teaching a class and you have students going out in the community and doing some type of service that's related to your curriculum, that's service learning typically. Community-based research is another element. If you've got students out in the community doing research, maybe they're not doing direct service or a practice-based service, but they're doing research that then is going to fold into one of your papers, which we're going to talk about as a creative way to work with your students. So these are some of the arms of it, and then at Weber they have decided to call it community engaged learning. So here at Weber, we use this phrase for kind of everything. So you will not often hear service learning or community-based research, but if I send you literature, I don't want it to confuse you because most of the national resources service learning. So there will be no quiz on all the semantics of the world of community work, so don't stress it. But I just wanted to let you know because I know a lot of people get really confused about service learning and community engaged learning and what the differences are. So.
And I would just add too, democratic engagement is another one that
civic engagement, kind of another
great one that you hear sometimes, which looks a little different than service learning.
I know. How do you want to put
no,
science? So that's just kind of a little intro. And actually, the Center for Community Engaged Learning, we're actually hiring a new program coordinator right now. That program coordinator will help us work with underrepresented students to get them more engaged through the center, as well as with student affairs departments. So we have a really good showing in academic affairs through classes, and we're trying to do more with student affairs departments as well. So it's very fun. All right. So, yes. So here are some of our objectives today that we're going to do. We're going to talk about innovative teaching. Everyone loves to hear the word innovative. It's like the hottest word around, right? Community engaged scholarship and service. And then we're also going to then talk about we're also going to do an exploration of the opportunities for showcasing community engagement in the autobiographical form, which I passed out to you, and discuss the importance of making your case in your personal statement. So feel free to chime in if you have any questions as we do this. I hope this works. I didn't test the Wi-Fi. I should have done that. I was going to use my Mac, but they didn't have the Mac adapter. So promotion criteria does not explicitly state community engagement in teaching or scholarship and barely does so in service. So I want to show you where this comes up in Weber. Oh good, it does work. So how many of you are familiar with the PP? Oh, it did not work.
Pass these out. I'm going to pass these out.
So it came up on my screen, but not the PowerPoint. What would be the reason for that?
Can you drag it over?
Yeah, drag it over.
It may not work. I'm going to pass this out anyway.
Wait, why would it not work?
Oh, okay.
Well, I don't know.
Well, if you go to that, it's long. Have you guys all looked at 8-11?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask. How many of you are familiar with PPM on campus? It's okay if you're not. But I try to ask this question. Have you met with your departments to discuss the PPM?
What does PPM stand for?
That's a good
There you
question.
go.
I know. What is it? The Personnel
Policy and
Procedures Manual. So I was going to show you. I don't know why it's not coming up. It's coming up on this.
Right.
Oh, there it goes. Okay, so I just need to escape maybe.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
And maybe hold on. If I do it this way. Yeah, there we go. Okay, I just have to take the long way. No worries. So I wanted to show you this. Oh, I don't know how to do this on the PC. Sorry, I was not expecting to use the PC. So in the PPM in 8-11, in the tenure review, it actually talks about community engaged learning and the role community engaged learning can play. I don't know how to search on this thing. I had them all set on my Mac.
Control F.
Yeah, Control F will get you fined.
I'm such a Mac person, I'm so sorry. People like me and hate me for
Community
that.
service.
So, okay, next one.
Projects such as undergraduate.
Why is it jumping? We're gonna start at the beginning. Okay, so some of the examples that it gives in here, I was reading these. So, not that one. I had them all highlighted in a color and everything, sorry. So, so community engaged learning starts to come in under teaching. So Becky Jo, I don't know, like if you want to give some examples from your own college.
So yes, and I'm thinking about autobiographical form under teaching. You might put something, maybe you've designated a course or a class that you're teaching as community engaged learning. I know recently in our department, we've recently designated our professional technical writing program. The whole program is community engaged learning, so it doesn't have to be. You can go through the program without doing all community engaged learning, but you can take all 6 courses and actually do that. So that would be something to mention if I haven't done this for a little while, but if I was writing my autobiographical form, I would certainly indicate on the very front page highlights of my overview of my teaching that I developed 3 courses, 3 classes to be community engaged learning, received designation for those, and then talk about in your autobiographical form, in your supplemental file, what you did. So you list maybe your community partners that you worked with, much like you would if you were working with somebody on an undergraduate research project, for instance.
And that's what I was just going to ask, yeah, is if somebody could give another example.
Well, and I'll just, for me, when I listed it in teaching, I was under Roman numeral 3 teaching.
Right.
Under F, where it says teaching innovations, I always treated it as a teaching innovation.
Yep.
And so it would be, you know, whatever class it was.
Yes.
Whether,
Yep.
and I teach a few that are designated.
Right. So something that might help us is, so how many of you are teaching a traditional class, or mostly traditional classes, where you just meet regularly, a couple times a week, once a week, in person? Yeah. Is anybody teaching a class that might be designated differently? Online, hybrid, intensive, anything like that?
I have one hybrid class.
You do have one hybrid? Okay. So what about, is anybody teaching a class that's tied to the undergraduate research office on campus? What are you guys doing?
Well, for our senior capstone project, we have the students do research, and then they present the research at national forums and that sort of thing.
Is it on something specific to dental hygiene?
It usually is, or something related to healthcare.
And do you ever work with community partners when they're doing that research?
Yeah, I'm an advisor for one of them, and what we're doing, we do an annual sealant project where the inner city kids come up to the dental hygiene clinic and get sealants on their teeth free of charge. And we're following the children over time for retention of those sealants.
Yeah, so there's a great
So
community
that's what
focus
I-
there. So that would be a really good example as well. And I think Becky Jo hit on the key point, which is sometimes you might not even think about what
Right.
you're doing, but you actually could discuss it as a form of community engaged learning. So yeah, so that's one piece that you can review in the PPM. See, I'm excited. We're sending some people to the PPM.
It's always the goal,
It
right?
is.
Yeah.
The
Find
other
references to the quarter system.
I
It's
know.
still in there.
I know. Oh, you do?
Oh, yeah.
How long have you been off quarters here? That's funny.
A long, 20 years.
Long time.
So,
95.
something else that's in PPM in terms of is recommendations.
Mhm.
So that you'll gather recommendations as you go up for tenure, and there's an emphasis on community partners. So a lot of times faculty don't think about that, getting a letter of recommendation from a community partner, but that's another great resource. And especially with Weaver's commitment to community, whether it's, you know, through research, whether it's through a direct service where your students are mentoring kids at an elementary school or a nonprofit. There's a lot of different ways that you can include that, but it just builds on the file as well.
Absolutely.
Could
And
you
you
do
could,
that?
in the autobiographical form, for instance, mention that you did the CEL project, and you could put the name of the person, community partner, and then you could, you know, send people to your supplemental file where they could read the letter from your community partner, so.
Yeah, and then it's in
Good
here again, under
Scholarship.
scholarship. There are all these different examples, so you have funded research, creative activities, presenting at national workshops. Why is it not going down?
Yeah, it's weird. And then
Um,
projects, yep.
And then also projects such as undergraduate, graduate, community engaged work. So the whole idea of showing you this is to kind of show you that Weaver does include it.
Yep.
And then we're going to get into a few more specifics with your own departments and colleges as well. So the one thing that PPM does stress is that your own community service is a little bit different. So like if you go volunteer at a nonprofit, that wouldn't necessarily go into your tenure review. But if you're volunteering at a nonprofit that you've then, you know, partnered with them for 6 classes, you could include that because you would be showing kind of a longevity of partnership and building on that. So if you teach one class and you have let's say the first class you go out and you have your students read with kids. And then the second time you go out, maybe you have your students revise the tutoring process to work with the kids. And then the next time you go out and say, why is it the kids don't seem engaged? And you start to work with the kids to say, oh, well, they're actually hungry, or they are bored because they sit here for an hour and don't do any kind of fun activity. So you can keep building on that as you kind of proceed. with your community work. So I think those are the main.
It isn't, I haven't looked at this lately and just looked for that term, but it's encouraging that it is in all three areas, teaching, service, scholarship.
Yeah.
It did not used to be in teaching and scholarship.
Right. So there has been
Teaching, there would be undergraduate research, perhaps, and internships, thesis, you know, directing a thesis or something like that, but that's some good progress we're making as an institution.
Yeah.
Your colleges may have different levels of involvement with CEL, but.
Yeah, and that's something, this link actually just takes you to each college.
Right.
Which I don't think that we all want to see each other's colleges, but I want to give you the link so,
Really cool.
so that you have it. And it's something that some of you may not have thought of, especially some of you who are new because you're still just trying to settle, find the right room, as Mike and I were talking about, find the right rooms and not get lost anymore. So this may not have been your pressing issue from the forefront, even if you're in your second year, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, or some of this stuff may have been revamped and you may not be aware of it.
Right.
And so it's really, really important to kind of go and look at your own college. And that's why I wanted Becky Jo to come as well to talk about kind of her college and what they're emphasizing. And so this was a review that Brenda Kowalski did. She's the associate provost. And so when she did this last year, she was able to pull that these are the colleges that have some type of CEL language in their tenure review, and then these are the colleges that do not. But I do know one of those is actually having a retreat in January to start thinking about adding this language. So I think there is some movement from them as well.
I know, so which one's having the retreat? Is it business or science? Yeah. Science has been talking about it too, so there's some
And I think the
minor
other big
movement
piece is
way.
that this doesn't mean that these departments are not
Don't value
doing
it,
community
right.
engaged learning or that they don't value it. I think it just means that they haven't reached a point for that specific department or that specific college to incorporate a full paragraph in their, in their tenure review. And that just comes over time. It's really interesting because if you look at national research done on community engaged learning, there are people who push for a completely engaged campus where every single department and every single college actually supports community engaged learning. And then there are others who say that's not realistic.
Right.
Instead, focus on those who really value the work and keep them moving along and going even deeper, and then support the others who are in other colleges and departments. So it's really an interesting trend. I mean, I think it all is based on some follow the Boyer model. Have you guys read Boyer's article on Scholarship Reconsidered? So that's something I would encourage all of you to do.
Yeah, I need to read that one.
Gosh, the only one that works is brown. This is like making me crazy because I can't stand using one color.
Sometimes they have pens and words. It's locked.
So when Ernest Boyer wrote this article, it was really a call to higher education to start to think about ways to better engage with the community and ways for faculty to help students kind of think beyond the four walls and beyond the ivory tower model that's kind of been prevalent in higher education for a long time. And obviously those of you who are here are interested in work beyond the four walls. And so yeah, so it's a really neat article. But like I say, I think that community engaged learning is a really, really great thing, but it's not for every class. It's not for every faculty member. And so that's part of our goal today, is to help you figure out if this is a good fit, and if it is, how we can support you in, as you pursue tenure. Or those of you who are already tenured and kind of serving as a role model to others in your own department. So. All right. So in teaching, although not explicitly stated in promotion and only explicitly stated in 4 tenure policies at Weber State University, community engaged learning pedagogy has been recognized and rewarded in practice as innovative teaching. so we talked about that. So Weber State, with all of the push for a revision of general education and kind of thinking through what general education looks like, there is a lot of discussion around innovative teaching models. So for those of you maybe in your first year, did you take any classes or have any discussions in your doctoral programs about innovative teaching? Or your master's? No?
Grad schools still aren't teaching us how to teach.
I know.
No, they're
It's the
not.
weirdest
It's
thing,
like,
right?
you just have to do statistics and research.
Yeah.
I'm always hopeful though, one of the times that I present that somebody's gonna be like, I did, and that person who's really excited. So then, you know, when you come into the teaching role, one of the things that often happens is you get 4 classes and you're overwhelmed, and so community engagement might be a little bit scary at first, but it really is a neat way to be innovative, and it doesn't necessarily have to be more work, because it's kind of thinking through how does this either fall in place in place of another assignment, or, you know, what are we going to do? And I'm hopeful like Barrett and some others will share what they're doing right now as well. So, but I guess that's my question, is it something that you're excited about, having your students work with community members?
Yeah.
Totes.
Yeah.
Totes goats.
You just say totes for goats.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yeah. The other thing too is sometimes when people think innovative teaching, online, we know there's a push for online, but a lot of people think you can't do community engaged work through online courses, and that's not true. There are some institutions that are fully online doing amazing community work. And so it's kind of just working with the students and whatever community you're in to make it a good fit. So don't think that if you're teaching online or teaching hybrid that it rules this out at all, because it actually is kind of another fun way to approach this.
One of the arguments I hear a lot too, just yesterday a couple chairs in our department were talking about how, yeah, but you know, we have students who work full time, they've got families, they're going to school full time, they don't have time to go out and do an internship, they don't have time to go out and, you know, meet with a community partner or do some research or something like that, just sort of high impact practices in general. And my argument is, I mean, I've been doing this for a long time and I teach a lot of non-traditional students. It's like they have time to come to class, they can take the class, they can do this. It's not, if you really build it in well to your curriculum, it's not an add-on, it's not something else you have to go do, it's truly fulfilling the needs of the course, and it's part of that whole learning experience. So with the hybrid, I'm glad to hear you're doing that. So when I teach a Tuesday, Thursday class, for instance, and I've got a community engaged learning component, I set aside, after we get the class kind of going, Thursdays I'll leave for them to work with their groups and to meet with their community partners. So hopefully their schedules will work and they can use that time. So that's one way to really help them see that it's not, those barriers we want to throw up for this kind of work are really often not valid. So,
Could you
yeah.
explain the community engaged component of your class?
So yeah, I'm teaching one right now, for instance. It's a grant writing class, which lends itself really well to working with nonprofits in the community. So what students do is we do a lot of reading in class about writing proposals, because grant writing is basically learning how to write a proposal, which is something you learn in tech writing. So how do you write a proposal? What are the theories behind that? And we do some kind of stuff in the classroom. Then I have found community partners for them to work with who want to work with students, and we pair them all up or partner them up, and they meet with their community partners. They come up with a contract with their community partners that says, we're gonna help you write a grant to Walmart Foundation for supplies for, they're doing a sleep out, Youth Futures, a homeless shelter. They want to do a sleep out in February on campus, and so they want to get some supplies for this. So they work through what the community partner wants from them, what they can do within that time, and then they spend the rest of the semester working on various assignments related to grants for me. So whatever they end up doing for their community partner, they still come away with 2 grants that they've written for that organization. And I kind of lost my train of thought. But then whatever it is that they do with their community partners, sometimes they're doing research. They're compiling lists oftentimes of grants and just kind of spreadsheets of here's the criteria, here's how you could apply for this stuff. Because frankly, the semester's too short for them to really, they're just getting to know the community partner and understand the organization, and then they kind of have to be done. I'd love to do a year-long thing. It might be something that I work on. But that class, it's easy to see how a community engaged learning component makes sense. And the students get that experience working with a community partner. They get whatever knowledge I can bring. I frankly know very little compared to what the community partners do. And then the community partner often gets a whole set of documents that they haven't had before, stuff submitted, better products, hopefully, writing products. Does that give you an example?
Yeah.
And you had a couple different nonprofits they were working with, right?
Yes, I have 4 this semester. So there's Head Start of Davis County, Youth Futures, Nurture the Creative Mind, and Ogden Nature Center. So it's a range too. It's not just, part of the struggle for me initially was finding community partners that wanted technical writing. But once I kind of educated community partners about what that could be, they're like, oh, well, yeah, we could use help with this. Grant
Grants
writing,
for us.
people
What?
hear grants, they're like, oh yeah, I need help with that.
Yeah.
But some of it is educating the potential community partners about what you do. Like I teach a content management class and everybody kind of goes, you know, what's that? So there's like these speed networking, speed dating things that the CCEL offers, so you can meet community partners rapidly, a lot of them in one place. And then you can educate them about what they tell you what they do, and then you tell them, you know, what you do, and hopefully find a good match. But some of this, it does take some time up front, like developing those relationships. But then, I talked about this last week, in some ways, it's a very different kind of teaching model because partway through the semester, the students are working on these projects, and it's like, I let them go.
Yeah.
They're doing the work, and I've done a lot of work up front. It's like developing an online class. A lot of the work goes into the upfront stuff, but then the workload becomes less as we go along because I'm really serving as a coach or a facilitator. Has that been your experience, Stephanie, maybe?
Absolutely. And then from year to year, just by evaluating the program, see how it's going, you can make adjustments in it.
Exactly.
The Sealant program that I alluded to a few minutes ago, that's been going on since 1999. So different years, it works out better or worse, and I was just doing some preparation for it. It happens in the spring. It's called DENT 3301, Community Service Learning Lab. And whenever the immigrant status of individuals in our inner city come to play, it happened about 8 years ago, I think, that when people get a little bit nervous, they don't want their children to participate in programs that they have to write their name and address and phone number on. So as I was looking at all the documents that I'm preparing for spring semester, you know, on behalf of this project, I thought, oh my gosh, I wonder if we're gonna get into another year like that.
Right.
Where we could see up to like 32 children for each clinic, so it would be, I think approximately 240 children in the year where we were really hit with immigration issues for the inner city of Ogden. We were down to like 150 kids. It was a big hit.
Wow.
And so the students are ready to provide care, interact with the children, and really teach them a lot about taking care of their teeth and about teeth in general and their overall health. And then the children just couldn't come because of the permissions.
Right, yeah. And you have to just suck that up. I mean, there's not, so, and that's the thing with just the grant writing class, which you think, yeah, just writing grants, you can do that whenever.
Right.
But it's also, you know, grant cycles, we're on semesters, our academic calendar's different than grant cycles, and sometimes community partners are gone or really busy with other things, so there's, but I think that's important for students to learn too, is that, I just talked to a student last night about this, it's like, this is the way of the world, nothing's gonna conform to, to our nice little schedule on campus necessarily, right? The community needs are gonna change what we do.
Yeah, and to know your community. referred to the Walmart grants, we've been able to get Walmart grants on behalf of Head Start programs that we've done. I mean, we've all worked together. We put fluoride varnish on the little Head Start kids' teeth, you know, by going to the Head Start classroom.
Right.
And so that's been an outreach that we're looking at. Part of one of the research projects was how bad are the children's teeth, you know, with all the IRB and everything that goes along with that.
We're gonna
Right.
talk about
You guys have to
IRB.
deal with
Yeah, we
that.
are gonna talk
Yeah,
about
you
that.
need to talk about
But
that.
that was the question, how bad are the children's teeth? So we had to get a baseline. But then that population is so transient. It was
Right.
hard to follow it, so we're kind of doing a pseudo cohort that we're following for 5 years.
So
of
you've got some
children
good
kind of
research
coming-
going on.
Yeah.
Coming and going, yeah.
Yeah, and
It's
so that,
hard.
so that actually leads really well. So the teaching is, as mentioned in PPM and as mentioned in many of your colleges, innovative teaching is highly valued. And so you just had a couple really great examples of innovative teaching and kind of getting the students out. So the next part is the scholarship piece. And so it's the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning and Community Research. So research on community engaged learning pedagogy to improve teaching and learning through scholarship of teaching and learning. I know that sounds funny and very repetitive, but if you think about it, if you were to do a study kind of with your own students and the way that they're learning, so like in engineering, I mean, are students more likely to learn from practicing? Are they more likely to learn from reading? What is it? And if you're able to have this community element, there's a way for you to start to research and say, man, I tried this new approach and you know, my test scores compared to the previous semester where we didn't do something like that increased, you know, 10%, 15%. And so then you are able to take something like that and turn it into something publishable, which is really neat. And there are a lot of teaching conferences. I know that seems sometimes outside of the box, but a lot of the teaching conferences really are looking at more disciplines to participate, and especially the STEM fields. Like how are we teaching STEM topics? The other piece would be publishing articles, making those are the examples. So I did want to mention, we do have, I think, 6 presentations going on at Utah Campus Compact, which is in Moab. They put on a faculty retreat, and it's a chance to present to your peers in Utah. And so that's, you know, something small, something affordable on a small travel budget, but it gets you a presentation to maybe get started with this work if you're not able to attend a national conference. The other thing to consider is that the Center for Community Engaged Learning sometimes could help fund if you wanted to participate in a community engaged learning conference. There are a couple that are focused specifically on that topic. And so this is another area where you'll want to check with your college and kind of, you know, what their focus is in terms of the journals you're publishing in, the conferences you're attending, and just make sure that you're on the same page. So research on community engaged pedagogies as well as other pedagogies has been rewarded in practice at Weber State, even though it has not been explicitly cited as scholarship in the promotion and tenure policies in the past. So also a good sign.
Yeah, I wanted to add something to that though. I was just talking to yesterday a colleague in another department who has been mentoring a new faculty member who recently went through her 3rd year review. And it's a quick turn, you know, from you start here and then boom, 3rd year review and then tenure, 6 years. Stuff happens really, really fast. And that 3rd year review is so valuable because it gives you a sense of where you are and, you know, are you on the right track. So this colleague was concerned about this newer colleague because she hasn't really gotten anything in the works in terms of publications, but she's doing a lot of community engaged learning stuff. So she's involved in very many committees and she's involved in clubs and organizations and, you know, mentoring students herself. And I suggested to this person, I said, well, what if we try and get her, we could, you know, partner up with some other people too and maybe get a publication for at least in terms of community engaged learning or you know, something to do with pedagogy because she spent a lot of time and energy on this. But this colleague of hers is concerned because her department really wants her to be publishing in the field in which she was hired. And so you have to be careful about, and this is why it's really important when Melissa's saying, is to find out from your department, your college, what are the priorities? Because if they really want an article or a book or, you know, presentations related to like technical writing, if I needed something in my field, even though I could publish about teaching technical writing, it may not carry quite the same weight as something you want it. You're nodding a lot, Colleen.
That is the best advice I think you will get.
Mm-hmm. And I hadn't thought about it. I was really glad because I thought, oh, she could publish blah, 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 blah.
Well, and.
But that wouldn't work for her.
I've seen it happen too much.
It didn't work a few years ago for me, let's just put it that way.
You've been through this.
I've been through it personally, and I published a piece, and it wasn't on community engaged learning. Actually, the piece that worked for me was a sale piece, but it was on teaching, and it was it was focused on teaching, not necessarily in communication overall, but just teaching overall, using writing actually. And that was the criticism that I got. This is not focused in your discipline, and you need something in your discipline. And so that's when I had to go back and get something else. So be sure that is clear. If you're in doubt, ask your department chair, ask your dean.
Yep. Yeah, and this really comes into play. So I moved forward to the community research piece.
Right.
So another thing that becomes difficult is we have a lot of really cool collaborations going on at Weber State. And like I was just speaking with someone from construction management, interior design, and East, and they were telling me like they helped create these designs that our students are going to take over the winning design and create a school in Mozambique. And it was designed, they put the students together in teams. So they had a construction management student, an interior. So it's a really neat piece. And they're trying to figure out how do we publish from this and how does it benefit all of us? And so that's another piece is as you start to settle in, there may be some interdisciplinary opportunities as well. And so being, you know, very cognizant of the idea that can you, you know, if one of you has to publish in your area, would the other also benefit? And it's a really interesting piece. And then the other part that is really exciting is this community research element of working with community partners and having your students also do research with communities. And so, so this would be like a policy report that you could send to the legislature that may actually be turned into a law. Right. It could be curriculum development for a class that's not doing very well, or for, you know, creating something neat for K through 12 around different topics. What's happening in, you know, child and family studies and early childhood. There's so much going on right there. And working with some of these practitioners and nonprofits and state policymakers, local policymakers, there are all of these different opportunities. The other piece that I would suggest is, I have been a part of a couple classes where we actually have had the students be the researchers, and then the students bring back the information, and then we will do some type of publication. The challenge has been that IRBs have been very particular that when people go out to research, they should have done the CITI training, right? And now IRB is trying to, I guess there are some new regulations coming out that are going to make this streamlined. And so the idea will be that maybe somebody's not going to have to do the full training, but you'll be able to do an abbreviated training possibly, where you discuss still, you know, ethical protocol and confidentiality. And I think this is not going to be the case if you're working with vulnerable populations, but if you're doing something that's doesn't really include vulnerable populations and where there are no identifiable factors, then there are going to be some new opportunities as well. And so then your students become your co-researchers as well, which is a lot of fun too. So
It's a model I've used a lot.
You have?
Yeah, so you understand the IRB.
It's like an early assignment for all my research classes.
And that's
do this
good.
training.
Right, and that makes sense, but when you're in a class that's, like we're talking about, you know, a comm class, like organizational communication, you don't go into that expecting to have to do that training. So it's kind of a surprise, and it may just be one of the assignments that's built in, But if there's a way to streamline or to make that process a little bit more doable. I mean, we're kind of, you know, we were going through the same thing on the Civic Action Network that I'm on, and we've got people from the city and people from Ogden School District who want to help do the interviews. And so to get them approval through IRB to be a part of that, because, you know, they're part of this community and they're wanting to do it. So it's gonna be really interesting to see what happens.
That CITI training was torture. It was really,
tedious.
really so much longer than I ever thought.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
we were using a different IRB training that was online before the CITI, and it wasn't the hours and hours
Right.
of work, you know, that you have to go on.
Yeah.
And that was one of the problems that we faced, is our students were just, you know, they were surprised. They'd get onto the CITI and say, it never ends.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, you just have to plan. You have to make sure
Right.
that you know it's gonna take you a while.
Well, and you can imagine then if you're asking a nonprofit executive director to do the training,
Right,
it's like,
exactly.
okay.
Ready for that.
So I do want to make note that it's not explicit, community research has not been explicitly cited as a form of scholarship at Weber's promotion and tenure, but it's moving forward, and so it may not be the main piece of your tenure application, but it would be a very nice complementary piece, especially if you're able to tie in your students and that innovative teaching model and kind of a couple different elements as well. I think that the College of Social and Behavioral Science is the exception to the rule.
Yeah.
You saw earlier education was the exception to the rule in another one, so I think it also ties back into some of those who require practicums or internships as well. I think see it a little bit differently.
So how is COSB's College of Social and Behavioral Science the exception to this rule?
Your tenure policy is much more favorable towards research that involves CEO. Would you say?
Okay.
Because I mean, you teach like all of your classes in a given semester,
All of them,
four.
as of last
Yeah,
week,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah, Barrett's teaching 8 CEL designated classes.
Oh, yep.
Four.
Well, 4, okay, sorry.
But over the
Well,
year.
but over the year you're
Oh,
teaching
over the
8,
year,
yeah.
over the year.
So even if they are the same class again, that's still 8 sessions.
Yeah,
But and your scholarship, you do a lot of.
yeah, I do quite a bit.
But when you think about name some of the departments in your college, right? So
Psychology,
Psychology.
sociology, history, all of those things, yeah.
so it kind of lends itself.
Political science.
Poli-sci, criminal justice.
Yeah, so those are kind of and then you have the autobiographical, we're gonna talk about that too. But the last thing is the personal statement. And I think that this is a place where sometimes, especially if you have, you know, maybe a chair who doesn't understand community engaged learning, or just because they've never been a part of it, right? They've been, you know, an amazing researcher, or they've been doing some of their different realms. This is part of going to your tenure review committee and kind of explaining it, better outlining it. I think a lot of times because I've been asked to review different community engaged pieces of tenure packets, and I think a lot of times it's just kind of missing the whole explanation, and really that it incorporates this innovative teaching, that you're helping students build critical thinking skills, problem solving skills, creating policy briefs that influence legal pieces, that you're publishing. I think that's a big part of it, and that's something that we can help you with. We have great resources like Isabel and Becky Jo and Colleen who have done this, and so they're able to talk to you about good and struggling experiences and kind of build from that. But I think this is the other piece too, is if there's a way for you to incorporate it in all 3 areas, then it doesn't seem like it's only maybe in the service realm where it's traditionally fallen. We know that the scholarship is the piece that sometimes is the hardest to sell, because the teaching, I think, as long as you're doing community engaged work, we can help you fulfill that. So that's kind of those policies. And so I'd like to just end with brainstorming and giving you a couple other ideas of maybe, you know, incorporating this in your own. But I do think it's important, like we've stressed, that you really are going back to your own college and thinking through, and that you're doing this from the get-go as you're building momentum, right? This is not the going back and going, oh, I taught this class, it probably did have some kind of element after it's been 3 years out, but thinking kind of through proactively. And so there are a couple different methods. Like I said, the formalization is that you can go through and get your class designated as community engaged learning, which means that it meets certain learning outcomes. It includes so many hours of the students doing service. And so we have quite a few who are doing that on campus, and we have quite a few who are not because they don't want to have the restrictions. And so both are fine, but I will say having the designation does carry a lot of weight because you're showing that you've discussed learning outcomes, which we all know is a really important part. The other thing too is sometimes I think it's being creative. A lot of people think, okay, well, service learning is just going out and working with a nonprofit. What does that really mean to my class? And so, can you think of something that you would want to do in the community?
I've been trying to think.
What are some of the classes you teach?
Measurement and instrumentation, electronic circuits.
Oh.
I think of a whole bunch of industry partners.
Right. Right.
I don't know if
So,
anybody's doing any kind of housing, I guess we could,
Yep.
with setting up electronics. I
yeah,
don't
so
know,
we
just-
have Habitat for Humanity. Ogden City has kind of a redevelopment program as well, where they're helping provide loans to people who are fixing up houses. I also think you could take a totally different approach and think through maybe what's happening with greenhouses and off the grid houses and different things, and kind of seeing if you guys would be interested in that. So there's the chair of geography is actually going to teach a class on, I think they're hay bale, or the hay bale or straw bale.
Oh, yeah.
I can't remember what it is, but hay bale houses. And so, does something like that have any circuitry or anything that's a part of that? Or, maybe it's the next step up that some places can't have the hay bale house, but they could have something else that's also energy efficient. And then the neat part about that is, I think a lot of people forget how creative some of our high schools are. Like I was talking to someone, how many culinary programs we have at high schools that can partner up here, or we know that there's a huge push to get especially girls more interested in STEM related fields, and so maybe the Girl Scouts or another organization would be interested in also collaborating. Even if you went to a private company, if you were able to bring in the Girl Scouts or a school as that third partner, there might be some really neat ways of thinking it through. So.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think that there are a lot of different ideas, and that's something that we could help you brainstorm, but also in a way that's strategic to say, how is this going to help you with your tenure? Right. Because our goal is, I'll be blunt, if we have a great faculty member who's doing amazing community engaged learning work and they aren't going to get tenure, that's crushing to us too, because this is somebody who's invested in this type of pedagogy and invested in the community, and so we want to be as supportive as we can. And like Joe and I have said, we don't want this to be an added thing. We want this to be incorporated in kind of what you're trying to help your students learn and take away from your classes.
What's the process of getting a class designated as community engaged learning?
So the first thing that I would do would be actually meet with Isabel, and her contact info is on our website, or I can get it to you. And she'll actually sit down with you and walk through the steps and show you an example syllabus to kind of help you think through, is this the right thing to do first of all, and how might I approach it? And then you would need to develop your syllabus and put forth a proposal. There's actually a faculty committee that reviews it. So I think there are 5 on that now?
Yeah, I don't know.
5 or 6 faculty from different colleges across campus who sit on that committee.
And then you could also do the fellows class.
Oh, yeah.
Who's done the fellows?
I have.
Colleen, Stephanie back
Yeah.
So every fall, Isabel's now doing it, she's doing it this semester. If anyone's interested, you can sign up for the fellows class. It meets maybe 5-6 times in the semester. And you read some stuff, get some background to, why do this kind of work? Does it work for your discipline? How could you make it work? And then you develop your syllabi together. So you have this cohort that you're working with. It's really helpful, sharing materials and approaches. And so by the end of the semester, you should be able to submit your course syllabus proposal for CEL designation. So right now there's not any monetary incentive for the fellows program, but it doesn't take all that much time, and it's really helpful just to kind of mentor you, help you through the process.
Yeah, but I
That's
also
sort of the
think
goal.
it can tie back into, right, the innovative teaching is that you attended these workshops to kind
Absolutely.
of help you think
Yep.
through, and I think this year she has a couple who are first year, a couple who are second and third year,
Right.
and then I think even a couple staff who are helping faculty as well to kind of think through for their college and their different departments, and so we have a couple going to this Utah Campus Compact retreat in Moab. And that's a fun retreat because I think Barrett's been. Colleen, have you been to the one? Yeah, so what's fun about that retreat is that you think about the state of Utah, and we have all sorts of institutions, right? We have research-focused institutions, teaching, learning-focused institutions, community college, private liberal, the technology colleges, the LDS Business College actually just let their accreditation go so that they can actually do some.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think that so there are a lot of different, we have our land grant institution in Utah State, and so it's kind of exciting to hear from them, because you might go to a session and think, well, what is somebody at Snow College, really gonna, and you'll be surprised. You'll be so inspired to say, I really never even thought about that. Like I guess, thinking about Ephraim, a very rural, small community college, teaching an urban, 4-year teaching and learning institution, like, oh yeah. And same thing, our faculty will provide a lot of great ideas for the other people who are attending as well. And so, that's how I really started with the flipped classroom model. And so Becky Jo mentioned, where she has them work on it. A lot of the flipped classroom model is that they do all of their reading outside of class and they do all of their application inside of class. So it's kind of, that you're flipping the model of regurgitating what they've read inside of class. And that's a great way to teach this type of work, is to give them that chance to work in their groups, work on their projects, problem solve together, because they're still doing the reading element, and then it gives you that chance to apply it. So I say there's a lot of really cool things going on. I've been really impressed. There actually are, one of the new models is having faculty housed at community partners. So instead of like a community partner fellow, you have faculty fellow at a community partner. So in some bigger nonprofits where there's more data and stuff is kind of where it's starting, but it's really neat. So if you're thinking about like research and help, there's a lot of fun things that I get to hear when I go to the national conference. Keeps me excited. And we also have, I'm excited to see faculty here who are tenured as well, because for me, it shows that they have this commitment to helping the newer faculty, but also sometimes re-energizing their own classes and thinking through what's the new brainstorming. And so another big point for us is we really just want to build this network that, for those of you who are new, want to bounce ideas off each other. You might be surprised even if you're completely different disciplines.
That's what's cool. When I started doing this stuff after I'd gotten tenure, actually, and I realized, you know what, I got tenure, that's great. Cool. Relief, big huge relief. But then it's like, now what? And this was the thing, it just blew everything open for me, and it made everything kind of come together and absolutely re-energize my teaching. It was just one of these, gosh, I wish I'd done this earlier. So I'm really psyched to see new people coming in just already with this. It's like, of course you do this kind of work, because I wasn't trained that way. And yeah, it's always, and now I have this approach to teaching that's just totally different. It's not by rote, it's absolutely different every single time, which is exciting. So
yeah. Does anyone have
Promoter.
yeah, anyone have any questions or, I mean, hopefully this gets you, you know, excited and maybe you'll go read the PPM and spend some time talking with your college. I think some of you in maybe your college retreats or department retreats might talk about this work.
And there should be someone in each of your colleges who is
Yeah.
already doing it. I know Jeremy Farner's done a bunch, and I finally talked him into doing the fellows program a while back. Come on,
He wasn't
you're
a fellow?
doing it. You're doing it already. You gotta just.
Yeah.
It was funny, but he just needed that little nudge. But there's someone in every college. So if you need help finding, either Melissa or I can help you find someone to talk to about this whole process, ranking tenure.
And the other thing to think about is, right, like, so, I mean, Barrett is excited and he's got all of his classes CEL designated. You all don't have to do that.
Yeah.
Some people may teach one class a year that's
Yeah, one's good.
community engagement focused, right? And the rest of you may teach 3 of your classes that way without the CEL designation. And so it's just how we can best support you and kind of get you thinking about this type of work is really what we're here for. All right?
Thank you.